Tonight, the Flames coach under fire.
A former player alleges the Calgary coach used a racial slur.
Allegations of this nature we take very, very seriously.
As hockey reckons with how to be more inclusive, how will the NHL respond?
Court documents reveal new details about the deadly boat crash involving Kevin OLearys' wife.
The Quebec Conservatives calling on Andrew Scheer to step down.
And our series on China's power.
Frankly, the government of Canada has fallen down catastrophically.
Security concerns about tech giant Huawei pouring millions into Canadian universities. This is The National.
In the NHL tonight, shock and now an investigation after allegations of racism by the coach of the Calgary Flames.
The unproven details are ugly and layered on top of Don Cherry's divisive comments earlier this month. There are calls for systemic change in the sport. At the center of today's story, Calgary head coach Bill Peters, whose future in that job is now very much up in the air. Tina Lovegreen with what he is accused of saying.
Pass the middle for Gensel. Gensel, wrist up, he scores!
Weighing down the Calgary Flames isn't just their poor performance this season, but now accusations of racism swirling around their head coach.
Unacceptable, not only in hockey, but in the world.
Gain a little room on Fowler. Plays it, they score! Alou gets his first NHL goal!
The allegation from former NHL player Akeem Alou that Bill Peters, quote, dropped the N-bomb several times towards me in the dressing room in my rookie year because he didn't like my choice of music.
This type of allegation is repulsive, I guess is the word I would use. So now it's my job to find out exactly what's taken place.
The team and the NHL both are investigating the accusations, which date back 10 years, when Peters and Alou were with a minor league team. Peters wasn't at practice today and hasn't commented on the allegations. But throughout the day, others came forward with claims that they too were mistreated by the coach.
Back when I played, it was definitely there.
The first NHL player of South Asian descent, Robin Bawa, had to fight through discrimination himself and says players are more vocal now, but understands why they keep quiet.
If you're on the verge of, making it or not making it, you don't want to upset the apple cart.
Former veteran NHL player George Larocque says he faced racism in minor hockey.
But other than that, the N-word itself, I've never experienced anything about the N-word.
Inclusivity in hockey has been in the spotlight since early this month, when Don Cherry sparked outrage with these comments.
You love our way of life, you love our milk and honey, at least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that.
He was fired by Sportsnet, but some say whether Peters meets the same fate, racism in hockey is a much deeper problem.
Getting rid of one coach really doesn't solve the problem for all the other players coming up in the pipeline.
Peters remains on the team but won't be behind the bench for the Flames game tomorrow night in Buffalo. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the chief of a major police force outside Toronto has called for an investigation into what he terms highly offensive material. So this drawing was recently shared in a private Facebook group for his officers. You can see it shows two police officers accosting a man with dark skin, one pointing a gun, and a caption over one officer says, "My dad is my hero." The chief's response to our reporter says it all.
It's offensive. It's repulsive.
Yeah. I see you getting emotional. What's going on there?
Well, I think of the reaction of some of my own members and some of the reaction from the community. And I think, in some respects, you think you've made such headway. And something like this comes along and you go, what are people thinking?
The chief said the image originated in the United States and was posted by a retired officer.
Well, since losing the election, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has been under fire within his own party from those who say he should no longer be at the top. And now, Rosie, a new group is taking aim.
That's right, Andrew. This one is made up of some Conservative candidates who ran and then lost in Quebec, and they met with Scheer last night in Montreal. It's a stop on his listening tour, and as Hannah Thibodeau shows us, he didn't get a friendly reception.
Quebec candidates are clear. We need a change, says Marie-Claude Fournier. Scheer lost the moral authority over his team, and Quebecers, says Michael Miquel. Sources tell CBC News the whole night was like that, filled with devastating comments about the Conservative leader.
He had his shot. I was one of the people who supported him for leadership, but right now the party and our leader didn't deliver what we were supposed to achieve in the last campaign, and I think now the better thing is to step down.
They lost progressive Quebecers because of Scheer's views on abortion and same-sex marriage. But now some social conservatives also say Scheer has to go. Ironically, because of his position on abortion.
He said that whatever position he supports privately, he will not support publicly. So obviously that kind of position is no longer a socially conservative position, because we are looking for somebody who is going to support the socially conservative position on the political stage.
And I know that moving forward, we're going to demonstrate to even those people that are skeptical that it's the right choice.
While critics try to push him out, Scheer's allies say he'll push through.
You can see the fire in the belly. You can see his dedication to this country and his commitment to the party, his desire to lead this caucus forward. Absolutely, no question.
Not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere.
That might not be up to Scheer. Each day, more public criticism, more private organizing, all trying to force a change at the top. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
Justin Trudeau is in the middle of his own kind of listening campaign, meeting with premiers, one after the next, on the heels of an election that laid bare so much public frustration. Today's guest, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Dwight Ball, a fellow Liberal who is also running a minority government. Last week, it was Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and in the weeks before that, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, PEI Premier Dennis King, and Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister. As David Cochrane explains, it's part of Trudeau's new approach.
The Prime Minister, who used to go everywhere and do everything, has largely been staying put and doing one thing, meeting with other leaders.
It's just always a real pleasure to sit down with Dwight to talk about how we're going to keep working hard for Newfoundlander and Labradorians.
The new Minister of Everywhere is Chrystia Freeland, tasked with engaging some of Trudeau's harshest critics, especially in the West.
We're very pleased that Chrystia is originally an Alberta girl, and she represents Toronto now, but she understands the whole country. And I know you grew up in a farm family in northern Alberta.
That is absolutely right, in Peace River, where my dad still farms.
I love it.
Alberta on Monday, Saskatchewan on Tuesday, in a scene that will play out many times in the coming months.
The people of Saskatchewan sent a message to our government on Election Day, and so I'm here to talk to the Premier, to look for common ground.
It's an approach to emphasize team over Trudeau. His first term was frequently a mix of celebrity-style moments and near-constant campaigning that put Trudeau front and center, but stuck a bullseye on him personally.
I just want to see this country survive.
With parts of the country angry, some premiers say it's time for calm and to move past personal grudges.
If the focus is on people that live in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador, rather than the Prime Minister, I think we can get there.
That approach will be tested this weekend in Toronto when Freeland sits down for a group meeting with all of Canada's premiers. The Deputy Prime Minister will update the premiers on the state of Canada-U.S. relations and continue this approach of making politics business, not personal. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
And in keeping with this team strategy, tomorrow the Prime Minister will attend a special orientation session for his new 36-member cabinet here in Ottawa. The union representing CN rail workers is thanking the federal government for not stepping into their contract dispute. This morning, they announced a tentative deal, ending a week-long strike.
The best way to solve this issue, we're at the bargaining table, where the party can reach an agreement, a reasonable agreement that they can both live with.
Normal operations will resume tomorrow. Provincial and industry leaders had been pressuring the federal government to do something to help end the strike. Yesterday, farmers dumped corn outside the Prime Minister's riding office in a call for action. Today, his ministers defended their approach.
We were given the assurance throughout this that both parties recognized the impact that this was having on Canadians, had a true commitment and spirit to resolve this, and both were committed to being flexible.
The agreement still needs to be ratified by union members, so details are not yet public. Workers had complained, though, of long hours, fatigue, and dangerous working conditions. That's it from Ottawa right now. Let's go back to Adrian and Andrew in Toronto.
Well, the United Nations is painting the bleakest picture yet of what's in store for the planet unless the world can dramatically reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. Today, we learned those emissions rose by 1.5% every year of the last decade. And the UN warns that the way things are going, global temperatures will rise by 3.2 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. That's pretty much double what's considered the absolute minimum we ought to be doing, which experts say could lead to more environmental catastrophes and completely submerging populated coastal areas. As Aaron Collins tells us, while Canada is not on track to meet targets, many are pushing for that to change.
Calgary's Green Gate Energy hopes to change how you see renewable energy, using virtual reality to show off its new solar and wind projects.
It looks like an ocean of solar panels.
Yeah, this is the future of energy in Alberta.
The company calls this $500 million solar array part of the solution to the climate crisis.
It's going to be by far and away the largest solar energy project in the country, one of the largest in the world. And ultimately, when it's completed, it's expected to provide a clean source of power to more than 100,000 homes.
But Canada needs many more projects like this right now, according to a new UN report.
Countries really need to step up, because if it's not starting from 2020, seeing some serious action plus some ambitious plan, there's just no way we're going to make it.
Canada is set to miss its emission targets by 15%. Globally, the report says efforts to reduce emissions must be tripled just to meet Paris Accord targets.
Is that possible? Absolutely. Will it take political will? Yes. Will we need to have the private sector lean in? Yes. But the science tells us that we can do this.
Some environmentalists believe Canada's political climate is right for action now.
The dust is settling on an election campaign, and one thing is very clear. 2/3 of Canadians voted for a party that had a strong climate platform.
Canada's new environment minister agrees, but also hints at the challenges.
We certainly understand that there are concerns and questions and uncertainties for provinces that are major hydrocarbon producing regions.
And back at Green Gate Energy, they say change is coming with or without government help.
We have been hearing that the tipping point has been coming for years, but it has finally arrived. And we're starting to see more and more renewable energy projects being built around the world on a subsidy-free basis.
Today, the UN made it clear climate procrastination is no longer an option. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Now today, some young people from across Ontario took legal action on climate change.
Doug Ford's government is failing in its responsibilities to fight climate change.
They are suing the Doug Ford government because it scaled back the province's targets for greenhouse gas reductions. They say that infringes on their charter right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Later on The National, we'll take you behind the scenes. I had a chance to meet those young people face to face to talk about their coming court battle.
To the UK now, where the British Labour Party has been dealt a serious blow just 2 weeks before the general election. The UK's chief rabbi has written a scathing editorial in The Times, accusing Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn of failing to crack down on anti-Semitism, calling it a poison that has taken root in the party. Renee Filippone now with Corbyn's reaction.
Arriving at a campaign event to talk about fighting racism, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn instead faced hecklers and questions about anti-Semitism.
There is no place whatsoever for anti-Semitism in our society, our country, or in my party, and there never will be so long as I'm leader of the party.
For years, Corbyn has faced growing criticism that he wasn't dealing with anti-Jewish racism in the party. Today, in the midst of an already heated campaign, Britain's chief rabbi waded in, writing in the Times the overwhelming majority of British Jews are gripped by anxiety, questioning if Corbyn should be considered unfit for office. Ephraim Mervis urged every person to vote with their conscience.
So this was our front page 2 weeks ago.
A similar message published on the front page of the Jewish Chronicle. Reporters here have been chasing stories of anti-Semitism in the party for years.
So the vast majority of the cases of anti-Semitism are variations on the Jewish conspiracy theories. They either say things like Jews are in the pay of a foreign government and do their bidding.
They sold it to you.
Boris Johnson has faced questions about how his party has dealt with allegations of racism as well. The Muslim Council of Britain today accused the Conservatives of not dealing with Islamophobia.
If anybody is convicted, if anybody is done for Islamophobia or indeed any other prejudice or discrimination in the Conservative Party, they are out first bounce.
This political analyst says what's happening is a symptom of the division in the UK.
These big existential issues about race and about discrimination are coming to the forefront of our politics. It's because we're in a situation where this election really matters to people in the UK.
Every community.
So no apology.
Tonight, in an interview on the BBC, Corbyn was asked repeatedly to apologize to the Jewish community.
Can I just make it clear? Racism in our society is a total poison.
But sorry is not a common word for any politician. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
CBC News has uncovered details about a deadly boating accident that's drawn national attention. One of the people involved was TV personality Kevin O'Leary, and his wife has been charged. Here's Katie Nicholson with what we've learned.
The beauty of Lake Joseph belies the tragedy that played out here in August near Kevin O'Leary's cottage, where two boats crashed under the stars, killing Susanna Brito and Gary Poltash. O'Leary's wife, Linda, was charged with careless operation under the Shipping Act. The driver of the other boat, Richard Rue, was charged with failure to run navigation lights. Both are contesting the charges. The search warrant documents unsealed in court Monday after an application by CBC News provide new details. Police write Mrs. O'Leary was administered an alcohol screening device test and registered an alert. She was subsequently served a 3-day driver's license suspension. Mrs. O'Leary claims to have consumed a drink of vodka following the collision and prior to the breath test. O'Leary could not remember who handed her the drink of vodka following the collision. In an email, O'Leary's lawyer, Brian Greenspan, says his client was not intoxicated at the time of the crash. Linda O'Leary was not impaired. She is a highly experienced boater who was proceeding cautiously with due care and attention. She collided with a totally unlit boat on a moonless night, which was invisible to any prudent operator. No one could have avoided the collision. The documents also reveal more about what was happening on the other boat before it was struck. There were 12 people on board. They had just finished a dinner party. In the documents, police allege the navigational lights were turned off and the engine was stopped for the purpose of stargazing, and that the victim vessel had no lights on at the time of the collision. Police say they have video evidence taken from the O'Leary cottage. Summer is over, but questions linger about what happened here that night. Answers will have to wait until the case continues in January. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Parry Sound.
More news ahead on The National, including our series on China's growing power. Tonight, we look at its influence here at home and why a Chinese tech giant is pouring millions into Canadian universities.
But first, a party nearly 30 years in the making. Thousands in Winnipeg toast their new champions.
Welcome back. The Blue Bombers, fresh off a historic Grey Cup win, paraded through the streets of downtown Winnipeg as thousands of fans were there to cheer them on. Our camera McIntosh was in the thick of it, of course.
Winnipeg is in that kind of mood. When the football team lets loose, We're gonna put you on TV.
All right.
So your teacher can see it, okay?
And you pull the kids from school to cheer them on.
29 years, it's been long enough, so I figured this was a little bit more important.
Winnipeg's first Grey Cup parade in nearly 3 decades. Long enough to make this a once-in-a-lifetime event for many here.
This is sports kind of bring people together, and I've always had the Bombers in my life, and this is a time to celebrate. It's fun. There's all kinds of things going on, but, you know, this is something we can be proud of.
29 years of waiting, this is what it's all about. The Grey Cup going through Portage and Maine in a city that needs this right now.
Who's got the cup? We got the cup! A rash of violent crime has been putting Winnipeg in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. So an against-the-odds win from a team that's had its own challenges just resonates that much more.
We need it! It's bringing love, it's bringing joy, it's bringing happiness! We needed this! Forget all this bad that's going on in the city. We brought the cup home!
Positive vibes. Do we need positive vibes right now?
Yes.
Yes, it's just a trophy in a uniquely Canadian league with its own ups and downs.
The thing about sport is it brings people together and it can bring out the best in a community, and we're seeing that here today.
In a blue-collar town, a mob of blue estimated at 10,000 simply living in a moment. Like the players themselves. It helps one of the heroes of it all is a born and bred Winnipegger, running back Andrew Harris.
A dream come true for me, and it's absolutely amazing.
It's certainly wrapped up in a swagger and style all its own. Quarterback Chris Streveler might be the hero Winnipeg never knew it needed.
Grey Cup champions, baby. That's all there is. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it.
Last word to another homegrown hero, wide receiver Nick Dembski.
The drought is over. We did it!
Champions in a city maybe needing something to believe in. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Gosh, no one's going to have any voice left tomorrow. Okay, among the other stories we're following tonight, Toronto police have arrested the man they believe to be responsible for throwing feces at unsuspecting victims. A 23-year-old has been charged with 5 counts each of assault with a weapon and mischief. The arrest follows 3 attacks over a 4-day span where victims allege buckets of feces were thrown at them. The latest happened last night when a young woman had human waste dumped on her near the University of Toronto campus. 2 other attacks took place at university libraries over the weekend. An Ontario man is looking for answers from a global shipping giant after a gift was delivered with mysterious pills inside the box. Last week, the man ordered a kid's art set from Amazon for his 8-year-old niece, and he says he almost didn't bother checking the box before wrapping it up for Christmas. Inside, though, a small bag with an assortment of pills.
If I hadn't opened it, maybe I'd given it to my niece and she had opened it thinking, oh, my uncle gave me candy as well with my gift, and she had digested it. What would the consequences been then?
Amazon has apologized for the error and told him it is investigating. And Saskatchewan is the latest in a growing list of provinces to join a lawsuit against opioid manufacturers and distributors. BC filed the proposed class action last year, alleging drug manufacturers falsely marketed opioids as less addictive than other pain drugs. Newfoundland and Labrador, Ontario, and Alberta have also announced their support for the lawsuit.
All right, so time for a quick break. Ahead tonight, a turkey pardoning for 2019, complete with impeachment jokes and a few digs at Trump's opponents, too.
Next, though, trailblazing off the coast of Nova Scotia. An all-female lobster fishing crew is setting sail in one of the country's most lucrative but dangerous fisheries. The southwestern shores of Nova Scotia were teeming with anticipation and nerves today as lobster fishing season officially got underway. The last catch was valued at $500 million, and this year, an all-female crew wants in on that haul. Kayla Hounsell caught up with them dockside in Lunenburg.
This is how the most lucrative lobster fishery in Canada begins. A race in the darkness in potentially dangerous waters. Among the hundreds of boats this year, one believed to be unlike any other. The Nellie Rowe is manned by women.
I was involved as a child, helping my dad build traps and load the boat and do things like that, but I didn't actually go out on the boat. I guess part of that was, girls really didn't go out on the boats then.
Not anymore. Gail Atkinson has been fishing for more than 2 decades. The Nellie Rowe is named after her grandmother, a trailblazer herself.
She worked in the boatyards all of her adult life until she was 65. I've seen big changes. I've seen wives going out with their husbands and daughters helping out, and the men are super supportive of it and really encouraging.
She's proud, but says that can't be her focus.
Be careful today. It's not very good out there.
No.
Between wintry weather, boats heavy with traps, and competition,
I just get impatient and want to get them in the water, but yeah.
the potential for accidents and capsizing increases. It's Sophie Martel's first time.
I'm excited, I'm scared. I think this is probably one of the more dangerous jobs I've ever taken on, just in that there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong.
They do safety briefings to make sure everyone's prepared.
So you're going to be in prime position to throw a life ring?
The people lining the wharves know what's at stake.
You'll be safe out there, eh? Yeah. Thank you. I'm saying this on behalf of your mothers.
And then at 7 a.m. and not a minute later, it's time.
Let's get this show on the road. Yeah, baby.
I hope that it, for the teenage girls, especially in fishing families and things that have always been thinking that it wasn't a path for them, that maybe they see that it can be a good path for them to take.
But right now, their priority is keeping each other safe and catching lobsters. A whole lot of them. Kayla Hounsel, CBC News, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia.
All right, time for a quick break. Up next, we continue our look at China's power. Tonight, Huawei's financial relationship with some of Canada's top universities. Is it partnership or something more sinister?
And later, you'll meet the young people now suing the Ontario government for not doing enough to protect their future. We're back in 2.
They're either going to be a worldwide telecommunications company or an agent of the Chinese government.
This intermission brought to you by Huawei smartphones.
China's controversial tech giant Huawei is either the future of global communications or a giant Trojan horse bent on stealing valuable trade secrets and compromising Western security. Really, it depends on who you ask. Tonight on The National, we continue our special series on China's power with a look at this jewel in China's corporate crown. So how valuable is this company to Beijing? Consider that Canada's arrest of star CFO Meng Wanzhou last year touched off a diplomatic crisis that is still going on, and yet Huawei continues to do business here, even partnering with some of Canada's top universities. But who are these relationships really benefiting? Peter Armstrong digs deeper.
In a cramped Markham lab, Huawei researchers push the boundaries of the next generation of technologies, using your body to control a TV, your finger to control the volume, and nod of the head to play a video. All 3 researchers are products of Canadian universities trying to put their studies to work in the real world. A real world where Huawei is fighting against accusations that it's a very real threat to the security of Western nations.
We start creating a prototype and coding in order to show how feasible it is.
Huawei employs some 1,200 people in Canada. Nearly 1,000 of those are doing R&D. The company's VP of Corporate Affairs says Huawei is one of Canada's top spenders on information and communication technology research.
We would be, if not the biggest, then certainly one of the 2 biggest.
To do that, it's partnered with some of the biggest universities in Canada. CBC News has found 17 schools have had some kind of financial relationship with Huawei. Simon Fraser University in BC has agreements worth $8.5 million. The University of Alberta has deals worth $7.7 million. Waterloo tops the list with more than $15.3 million. U of T with more than $6.5. All told, Huawei is spending more than $56 million at Canadian universities.
Of course they want to come here.
That's Christopher Parsons, a senior research associate at the Citizen Lab and managing director of the Telecom Transparency Project. He says Canada is a world leader in wireless research. To maintain that, he says this kind of funding is desperately needed.
The concern, however, is not that. The concern is principally what happens to the information when it is produced.
And that's where things get hazy. Some schools are more forthcoming than others. UBC provided a clear breakdown and said all our research contracts include a publication clause guaranteeing UBC the right to publish results. Université Laval would only say the investment of Huawei is confidential as per the collaborative contracts. Guelph University says Huawei's invested in 2 research projects but refused to provide any details on the nature of that research. Huawei says it's committed to keeping the information in the public domain.
The researchers who collaborate with us have the ability to commercialize the research themselves.
But Parsons says that's only part of the picture. The real issue is the contract language.
What are the terms under which the patents are assigned, and are they being done in a way that are coherent with the Canadian government's foreign policy, foreign national security objectives?
The fear is that Huawei will send any patents back to China and prevent other companies from benefiting. It's not Huawei's only controversy. The company has become synonymous with the Chinese government, embroiled in accusations of spying and IP theft. Amid that, critics say the universities must have guidance.
Frankly, the government of Canada has fallen down catastrophically because it's just meant that no one knows exactly what they should be doing.
But the reality is Huawei is already here. It's working closely with Canadian wireless carriers and security agencies. And over more than a decade of operations here, the company says there hasn't been a single security incident or complaint.
If those counterparties didn't feel that we were a trustworthy actor or we were a company with whom they could do business, they wouldn't do business with us.
Experts say all this just can't be left up in the air. Huawei is at the heart of a debate that will impact how we communicate with one another for decades to come. The federal cabinet has only just been appointed, but these questions around Huawei, its research, and how Canadians will use the next round of technology must be at the top of the list of priorities. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
And China is exerting much more influence at a dozen schools across the country that host Confucius Institutes. Advocates call them gateways to learning China's language and culture. Critics fear they are spreading propaganda and even spying. Rafi Boudjikanian explores one Edmonton school board's relationship with its branch.
What is this in Mandarin?
At Kildare School, it's not just during Mandarin class that kids practice. Loran Yoakum gets to master one of the world's most widely spoken languages and connect with his grandparents.
They say every year, wow, how are you this tall? Or your Chinese is really good this year.
Confucius Institute signed an agreement with the Edmonton Public School Board 12 years ago, also appearing at other Canadian schools and universities. They're a Chinese government initiative, introducing the country's culture and language to the West, often providing funding, teachers, and teaching materials in exchange for campus space. But Mandarin learners aren't the only ones paying attention.
CSIS has legitimate concerns.
This former diplomat says Canada's spy agency has problems with Confucius, suspecting them of espionage on Canadian academics. An intelligence report from 2013 says Confucius Institutes are an organization for spreading propaganda and do not allow critical discussion of topics that the Chinese government deems sensitive. Despite the warnings, cash-starved educators may be attracted by the program.
So I'd most of all like to see governments, school boards provide the funding for Chinese language, but if there isn't enough of money available, it's very hard sometimes or difficult to say no.
But some parents are simply uneasy about having their children influenced by China in class.
Definitely students should be exposed to whatever kind of Chinese culture can be made available to them. The Chinese state has very different values from Canada.
24是一个合数，因为24的因数。
The Edmonton School Board recently renewed its deal, saying parents and kids love it. 10 board delegates were flown to China to sign the paperwork last year, all paid for by Beijing, a move the board defends.
I learned about the value that some of our principals within Edmonton Public see in having that partnership. Well, taxpayer dollars were not used. I'd be concerned about the optics if Alberta taxpayer dollars were used to pay for my trip to China.
EPSB says it reviews the curriculum, has no censorship concerns. Some other Canadian schools are not convinced. New Brunswick's education department says it's out after its current agreement ends in 3 years. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
And stay with us for more on our special series, China's Power, with a look at how Beijing is demanding more China-friendly movies in exchange for access to that giant market. That's coming up later this week on The National and on cbcnews.ca. We are back in 2 minutes with more news on The National. You all right?
Yeah, I think so. And later, what are the odds? A stuffed bunny that literally fell from a plane in the sky. It's been found. We'll explain it all in tonight's moment.
But first, in case you missed it, President Trump put a unique spin on a White House tradition today. Of course, we're talking about the annual pardoning of the Thanksgiving turkeys. After a little housekeeping, of course.
Thank you very much. Please. It's always nice to begin by saying the stock market is up again. We just set another record, and I think that's 132 times that we've set a record from the time we got elected on that very great day. Today, I will issue a pardon to a pair of very handsome birds, Butter and his alternate bread.
And then he vented a little steam on his political opponents and the ongoing impeachment hearings.
They've already received subpoenas to appear in Adam Schiff's basement on Thursday. It seems the Democrats are accusing me of being too soft on turkey.
But let's not forget about the press.
In any event, I expect this pardon will be a very popular one with the media. After all, turkeys are closely related to vultures.
Finally, it was time.
I hereby grant you a full and complete pardon.
And the rest, as they say, is gravy. Welcome back. More than 20 million Americans are under winter weather advisories, watches, or warnings tonight. And yes, the timing could not be worse. This was the scene near Lake Tahoe in California today. A winter storm is pummeling the west, bringing snow to the mountains, rain and wind to the coast. Another storm is hitting the Midwest. Highways in Colorado were closed to traffic today. Almost 500 flights in and out of the Denver airport were canceled. And later this week, another system will take aim at the Northwest. Officials in New York already warning it might just be too windy for those iconic floats at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade to fly. Meanwhile, thousands were evacuated in Southern California as an out-of-control bushfire continues to grow and threaten nearby homes. So far, the cave fire has scorched more than 1,600 hectares near Santa Barbara. Officials have declared a local emergency as all those heavy winds continue to fuel the flames. Some 2,400 homes have been forced to evacuate, but no injuries have been reported so far. And the grandfather of the toddler who fell to her death from an open cruise ship window is speaking publicly for the first time since he was charged criminally.
I remember trying to find her on the floor, and then I saw her fall. I saw her fall the whole way down. I saw her fall, and I was just in disbelief.
Sam Manello says he had no idea the window was open, saying his color blindness might help explain why he didn't notice. Last month, Anello was charged with negligent homicide for Chloe Wiegand's death. He's due in a Puerto Rico court next month.
Okay, time for a quick break. Up next, we take you behind the scenes as a group of young people prepare to take the Ontario government to court over climate change. On the very same day, the UN warned that it's now or never for action on climate change. 7 young people from ages 12 to 24 embarked on a very unique trip to the Ontario legislature. They announced they're taking the Ford government to court because they say its target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, too little, too late. They say the environmental damage that will come through government inaction will inevitably violate our charter rights. In effect, they're suing over climate change, and they think they can win. I had a chance to meet them in the lead up to the start of a long journey. This isn't a walk many people will ever have to make in their lives.
A little nervous, but excited.
But for these young people, they don't feel like they have a choice.
This is just one more way that the youth are standing up and taking action.
They've come from across Ontario to face down a government. And individually, they're as different as they come. An entrepreneur, an artist, some are activists, some just kids.
It's my future. It's the future of children, and it's unfair that some governments aren't doing enough to take action on this.
We first caught up with them just a day earlier.
This is the only planet we have, and it's the only known life in the universe. And we keep continuing to harm all that life. And it just makes, I just don't understand why we do it.
So here's the issue. Ontario's target is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. That is in line with the federal target.
We are fighting for our lives and for generations yet to be born.
But these young people call that inadequate, even unconstitutional, because of Section 7 of Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Don't take climate change seriously enough, they say, our charter rights get breached.
I'm suing Doug Ford today because we have a responsibility to uphold, and we have a responsibility to our environment and all of our relations.
What we're seeing is Ontario is going backwards instead of going forwards, and our clients are going to court to get the province back on track.
This is Fraser Thompson. He works with EcoJustice. That's the environmental law charity pushing this case forward.
I can't think of another case where we have reams, thousands of pages of documents that are not only endorsed by the best scientists in the world, but also by the very governments that are failing to act on climate change.
Shame on the Canadian government.
It's part of a growing trend to try and combat climate change in the courts. There's a lawsuit against Trudeau's government, one in the US, filed on behalf of 21 youth.
The best science says that we have 11 years at most to act before it's too late.
One of the challenges in this particular case, proving that the environmental damage to come will be so severe that would violate our charter rights.
But isn't that speculative in a way? You're casting into the future here.
It's speculative in the sense that it's based on one of the most scientific and rigorous processes that's ever been undertaken on climate change.
Adults and politicians are supposed to be our superheroes, but clearly in this issue they're not being superheroes. They're not doing enough to protect our future.
I want to remind some people that our economy relies on our ecosystem.
Shaylin Wabgijig is Algonquin and a member of the Caribou clan.
What if you lose?
I really hope that doesn't happen because I want that precedent to be set that people, especially young people's voices, will be heard.
So, this is just the beginning of a long journey. I should say the Environment Ministry of Ontario did issue a response today, essentially listing a great number of things that they've done to fight climate change, but also restating that the 2030 target for greenhouse gas emissions is the 2030 target. That's what it's going to stay at.
We'll keep watching that for sure. We have to take a really quick break, but when we come back, how this little bunny proves she is a good luck charm. We'll tell you all about it in our moment. Look how cute that is. Victoria McGuinness has had Bunny for as long as she can remember. The stuffed animal came with her on our first day of school and on every family vacation. So when Victoria and her dad had a chance to fly on a Lancaster bomber, a Canadian heritage warplane, Bunny had to go along. But somehow it fell, as in fell right out of the plane. And that started a social media journey to get Bunny back. You see, Bunny is a bit of a good luck charm, and she proved it this week after being found sitting on a roof, found by two workmen. So naturally, her lucky moment is our moment.
It was sitting there actually staring at us, and I said to Kevin, I go, we just found the Lancaster Bunny.
I couldn't believe it.
Everybody can relate to losing something like that.
My dad wanted to document the moment, bucket list item, go fly in the Lancaster. It's a beautiful shot right down the center of the aircraft, and took the picture, and he looked at the picture, heard a pop, and she was gone.
That area, there's so much woods around it, it's incredible it landed on the roof.
It could have been over Lake Ontario. It could have been anywhere. So yeah, like bunnies having like lucky feet, you know, it's proven true.
Everybody we've ran into that has seen the article, they're so happy. It's such a good story.
Yeah, no kidding. That's such a great lost and found story. And, you know, I can relate to this concept of well-traveled toys. My kids are always sticking things in my backpack, and then I find them later, and I'd hate to, you know, lose one of those things.
I kind of put them in your briefcase, too.
Oh, do you? Oh, is that where that came from? Oh, okay.
Amazing thing to know about her dad. He, as a navigator, so he geotagged that photo. He thought he knew where that bunny might be, even if it hadn't been found.
Wow.
That is a national for November 26th. Good night.
Good night.